Hello, and thanks for watching today. Today's episode was the first in a series of episodes that I did with widows who have lost their husbands from COVID-19. This episode was episode 49 of Widow 180, the podcast, and I had the privilege of talking to Stacy DeNoyior, wife of Anthony DeNoyior, who lost his life on April 19th, 2020 to COVID. Stacy talks to us about the experience of what it was like for Anthony at the time when he spent his time in the hospital. She talks to us about a GoFundMe account that was started for her and her family, and how she decided with her boys that she was going to take that money from that account and form a nonprofit on Anthony's behalf. And the fund that they started, the nonprofit, provides help and financial assistance to families in need. Other things we cover in this episode were finding the right therapist, what to say when people tell you the wrong things, learning how to slow down and give yourself time to grieve, and how to embrace change. Stacy and her boys understand one of the most important things in life, and that is the key to living is giving. And they are living out Anthony's legacy and making him proud every day. If you're new here and new to this channel, hi, I'm Jen. I help empower widows with stories, tips, advice, and support. Be sure to hit subscribe and that little bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I hope you enjoy this interview with Stacy. Hello, Widow 180 listeners. This week, my very special guest is Stacy DeNoyior, wife of Anthony DeNoyior, who passed away last April 19th due to COVID. So, we're about a year into when the COVID nightmare was starting to hit the U.S., and I feel like the situation that was happening last March, April, and May during the height of the pandemic was so unprecedented, and nobody really knew how to handle things and what to do, what was happening. So for those who lost their spouse during that time, I feel like it brought on a whole other level of trauma. And I'm so thankful to Stacy for joining us today to talk about her experience. So thank you, Stacy, for coming on today and talking to us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start with what happened with Anthony and when he first started to feel sick. So maybe you can start with that day. If it was like March 22nd or about that time.
Right. So it was definitely when things just started to blow up, if you will. It was very new. Nobody really understood what the symptoms were, if how it would hit you, how you could catch it, how you could contract it. Nobody knew anything. But Anthony was, I would classify him as a germaphobe. So he was very, very conscious of germs and washing hands. So he did all of the things we are told to do today. However, not everybody knew to do those things. So not quite sure how he contracted it. I can guess, but that would be it. It would be a guess. So he did start to not feel well on. It was a Saturday night after we decided to clean our home top to bottom with bleach because of germs, again, not knowing who had just come in our home. We had actually just celebrated my older son's birthday with family. And so, we just thought it was right to clean the house. So we did. And that night he just said, I feel odd, something's strange in my throat. Something's wrong. And I was like, it's the bleach.
Yeah.
It just made sense to me because my throat was irritated. It was the bleach, but he said no. He said this is something different, and I don't know how he knew, but by the next day he had, I would call it almost like a full-blown head cold, and he said something is wrong. And I said, you have like a sinus thing going on. This wasn't unusual for Anthony. He had a deviated septum. He would get sinus infections. It wasn't a big deal. But he knew that it was wrong. So again, being at the beginning, that wasn't, back then, if you look at all the media and the guidelines, those were not symptoms. So, they weren't symptoms. He didn't have a cough. He didn't really have a sore throat. He didn't have any of the original symptoms. So, we didn't really think much of it. He spoke to the doctor. Actually, what they had moved to Teladoc at that time because people didn't know. Our doctor, who's wonderful, you know, went down the laundry list of symptoms, and he didn't check off any of them. So she proceeded to treat him as if it was something different, and she did the right thing. I mean, nobody knew.
Yeah.
So, but 2 days later, Anthony said, "Stace, this is not what I've ever experienced. I'm starting to have trouble breathing." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And I thought maybe he was talking himself into it. Anyway, very long story short, at that time, the Department of Health was involved in getting you an appointment to get tested. You couldn't just get tested anyway. You had to go through the Department of Health. And when he called the Department of Health, he really didn't, again, fit the criteria. So he was 55 years old. He had no underlying conditions. So he was not a concern to them. They wouldn't give him an appointment. They put him on a waiting list. And so I was classified as diabetic at the time. So he said, "Okay, well, if you can't get me an appointment, just in case, can we get my wife on a waiting list because she would be considered high risk?" And so they put me on a waiting list. A couple of days later, he went to a local walk-in urgent care. They turned him away and said that he didn't have the qualifications to get tested. We then called, he was a captain auxiliary police officer, which I think you and I, that from the research that you've done. And we ended up asking the assistance of the police department to get him a test. By the time he got the test, he was already so far into illness that they told him, "We'll test you, but you have it."
Yeah.
The next day, he went to the emergency room. And in the emergency room, again, it was a war zone. They didn't know what to do.
So this was at that point when he went to the emergency room, that was March 28th. So that had already been like 6 days
Correct.
of just trying to figure out if he even had it. But he was progressively getting worse. He was getting worse.
Correct. The cough. I think he busted a couple of ribs from the cough. It was so bad. He was very weak, no eating, trying to drink. It was a progression of just watching. It was a horrible scene.
So he went to the ER, but then he came home.
Yeah, so he went to the ER. I drove him to the ER, and again, you couldn't go in with him. I had to drop him at the door. They even gave him a tough time at the entry, whether or not because he had no underlying conditions. He went in. They told him, "Yeah, you probably have COVID. We're not going to test you again because you just had a test and you still don't have the results. We have to send you home. You're not the worst here. So we need to." And at that time, again, ventilators were the key thing. They were putting people on ventilators, and they were taking those patients that they believed required the most assistance as it relates to breathing. So I guess his oxygen level passed the whatever test at that time, and they sent him home. And they sent him home that day.
So he comes home, and then you started to feel sick that same time, right? Okay.
That day, actually, while he was in the hospital for that short, brief, few hours, I thought to myself, "Oh boy, this isn't going well." And I took my temperature, and I had 104. And I thought, "Oh boy, I can't even tell him. He will not even take care of himself. He'll try and take care of me."
Yeah.
So I never told him. He never knew that I was ill. So I went and I drove and I picked him up, and we kept away from both my sons, who eventually they both got COVID, both of them. We all had it, but and then 2 days later, he ended up back in the hospital, but this time by way of ambulance.
Right. Okay. So he had quarantined in the basement.
Yes.
And then he just was getting worse and worse. But you were still, like, your symptoms were the fever, and you probably had some weakness, but it just didn't affect you the same way.
I don't think it, I have to be honest with you, and I don't know if this is just because of everything that happened, but the focus wasn't me.
Yeah.
the focus was him. He was in serious trouble.
Yeah.
And so I don't even remember how I felt. I
Okay.
don't, all I know is I felt extreme exhaustion and I was burning up, but it was more about how do I get help for him and,
Yeah.
and protect my sons.
Yes.
That was my primary focus at the time.
So on March 30th, that was when he was getting so weak and he couldn't breathe. When you did see him and called 911, you said he was looking kind of gray, like he was just not getting oxygen. So they
Right.
did take him they took him to the hospital.
Yes.
You said it took him how long to get a room?
It was
Like
over 36 hours.
36 hours to get a room.
36 hours. And again, I have such an incredible respect for the healthcare workers. Um, they were overwhelmed. They
Oh
didn't
my
know
God.
what to do.
Yeah,
They
I
didn't know
know.
what to do.
He,
And I don't blame anybody. It was circumstance, but from a personal perspective, it was very frustrating and scary to know that he wasn't getting really what he needed, but they didn't know what he needed. So
exactly.
that was the frustrating part.
But you were able to talk to him. You talked to him on the phone. How did he describe it to you?
He actually described it to me. He said, Stace, do you remember watching the movie Pearl Harbor and the scene where they were they were attacked, they didn't know, and they were inundated with patients, and they were basically looking and saying, well, this one doesn't have a chance. We need to save those that did. Although those probably weren't the things that were happening to him, that's what it seemed like, because they were looking at the severity of the patients and doing all they could for those specific patients. And the one thing I probably didn't say to you when we originally spoke was, I just know my husband. He probably said, go over there,
Right.
take care of them. I'm okay for now, thinking that they'll eventually come back. But he compared it to that horrible scene in the movie where it just was such an overwhelming situation. They didn't know where to put their hands first.
Right. And you had 2 opportunities to talk to him every day,
Yes.
right? What were those times?
So actually, during the time when he entered on the 30th, it was a Monday. And then he was once he got to a regular room, let's call it, I think it must have been sometime on April 1st. I was able to speak with him on his cell phone. I wasn't able to actually, there was no formal times in which I could speak to a doctor. The first time I spoke to a doctor was sometime probably towards the end of that week. I had placed a couple of phone calls asking. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
He was telling me that he didn't really know who was his main contact, and he was getting disoriented, and I knew I needed to speak with somebody. But the times I was able to speak to really got defined when he moved to ICU on the 4th. So I didn't have defined times during the time he was in a regular room. That's when I was actually able to speak to him on his cell phone. But the last time I spoke to him on his cell phone was really probably the 1st, because he was too weak to speak to me after that. It was all via
Oh, wow.
text. It was all via
Okay.
text.
Oh, it was texting. Okay. And on April 4th, you did talk to him.
I did.
He called you um because he told you they were going to put him on a ventilator. And
I have to take a deep breath on that one because
yeah, at that point,
so
it,
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead. I I I couldn't believe the phone rang, and it was his cell phone, and it was in the morning, and the days and nights seemed, I don't know that I could have made a distinction. Remember, I still had COVID. I was pretty sick at that point.
Right.
And the boys both were sick, and I really didn't want him to know, and so I kept the phone on at all times. And so when it rang, I thought, oh, maybe he's better. he's calling me.
Yeah.
And I was so excited that he was calling me. And for an instant, I thought, oh boy, I hope it's him. So for that split instance, and I picked up the phone and I tried to be chipper, and I was like, hi. And he couldn't breathe. And he tried to get the words out. And I said, well, why are you calling me? If you're struggling, why are you calling me? And he said, because the nurse told me not to text you and to call you. And I guess, they knew that going on a ventilator, going into ICU was, it could end up either way, is basically the bottom line. But at that time, it was not good. And so he did say to me that they were putting him on a ventilator and that he was afraid. But I don't think he was afraid of the ventilator or of passing. I think he was afraid to leave us, because it was always his number one priority. It was always fear for us, not for himself.
Right.
So I told him that Anthony was the one who brought faith into my world, and that he needed to really trust his faith, and that he will be fine. And told him I loved him, and that's it. That was the last time I spoke with him, which breaks my heart. I don't think I would have said anything differently had I known that that was the last time. I think I don't know. You question.
I don't know. Yeah. Like, what are you thinking that that's the last thing you're going to say to him? Like,
no, because you want to be hopeful that,
right.
that the ventilator was the right thing. He wasn't sleeping. He didn't have enough oxygen. He didn't, all those things. You're thinking, okay, well, this is going to help him. But again, they didn't know. They thought they were helping him. And even then, the doctor called me right after and said, look, Mrs. DeNoyior, he is a healthy 55-year-old man.
Yeah.
He will be fine. He will pull through this. And they didn't know.
Right. I was trying not to get upset again. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm trying to keep it together myself here.
This is the part that, like, when I talk to you, that, like, because it's one thing for you to not be with him, but just to know, like, what he was experiencing in there, by himself.
I didn't tell you something. When we spoke the other day, I didn't tell you this. I guess it was about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. I was, I don't know, I know my husband. So I went on his phone, and I found I knew my husband would do something like this. He videotaped himself while he was in that room, in the regular hospital room. And he knew that it was not going to end well. And he told me to tell the boys that he did his very best to fight, and that we were his entire world. So I didn't know that. I there was no way for me to know that.
You said you found that 6 months ago?
Yeah, I knew my husband was a documenter. Like, he would, I'm sure, I didn't even look, but I'm sure he has notes on everything that happened every single day. I don't know that I could handle that. But I do know that I knew that there would be something like that, because he just knew. He just knew. And that's why I could never tell him that we were not well, because that in itself would have put him over the edge.
Right. Right. So you did get a call. You got a call on, it was April 19th. And that was the nurse called you to tell you that he had passed away.
I actually got a phone call on the 17th, on Friday night. It was April 17th, and they never called me. I called them. So going back to the 2 times I was able to speak to them, I was able to speak to them once on the morning shift because it's ICU, and once in the evening shift. And so I would call exactly 9:30 in the morning and exactly 9:30 at night. And I never, if I didn't make, they couldn't actively call because again, they were overwhelmed. My phone rang on Friday night at about 10 p.m. On the 17th. And I, at that point, my heart dropped because why would they call me? And it was actually the physician's assistant in the ICU, responsible for respiratory ICU. And she said to me that she was calling me to tell me that they think I need to come to the hospital that night, that I need to see him. And I said to her, okay, like, what does this mean? And so she said the words that were very difficult for me to say, which is, they didn't expect him to make it through that night. And I said to her, well, okay, can I bring my boys? Like, and then I said to her, I don't even know if you're gonna let me in, I'm COVID positive. And she said, you can't come. And I couldn't go. So anyway, I went upstairs to the boys, and we thought it was going to be that night.
Yeah.
And that actually, I didn't share this with you when we spoke. I shared part of it, but I said to the boys, I don't know how to prepare you for what I'm about to say, that what's coming. And my younger son, Nicholas, who's not young, I mean, he's 17, he was 16 when this happened. And he said, Mom, you have been preparing us for the past 2 weeks. You've never once told us it was going to be okay. You need to prepare yourself. And it's heartbreaking when you have to lean on your kids on that emotional level. But what we did do was I called the hospital back that night. It was 11 p.m. And I said, I know I'm not supposed to call. It's outside of my window, but I just got this phone call, and is there a way you can put the phone up to my husband's ear? Can he hear us? Because they believe that you can when you're in that state.
Yeah.
So we begged him to keep fighting. And he rallied the next day. I got a phone call that on Saturday his oxygen level was higher, and that it was like, oh, well, then let us go on the phone again with him. And we had been going to the hospital every day, not to go in. We weren't allowed in, but we would sit in the parking lot and read from my husband's Bible every day. My husband read from his Bible every single day, and he would take notes in his Bible. So we would go and sit in the parking lot every single day. And the nurse, she knew we would be there, so she would try and call me the last couple of days while we were in the parking lot. So the day he passed, she called me. We were sitting in the parking lot. She says, I know it's 2:30 in the afternoon. You're probably right outside. And I said, I am. And she said, well, honey, he's not doing well. And we're going to give you the opportunity to come in if you want to come in by yourself. And her name, I don't know I don't know last names, but her name was Teresa. And I said to her, Teresa, my kids are in the car with me. I can't leave them. If they can't come, I can't leave them here. And he's got pictures of us all over the place. There's a picture on the side of his bed of the 4 of us. Tell me he looks anything like that picture, and I will force my way in. And she said, I promise you he won't be alone. She never answered the question. So I didn't go. I couldn't leave my boys. I just couldn't leave them.
Yeah.
So we left that day. The hospital. It was actually my mother's birthday. We left the hospital, and 7:30, I got the phone call. He passed away 7:30. I got the call 7:50, something like that, but he passed away 7:30 p.m. But I will say this, the nurse, and things come back to me, the nurse Teresa called us and said, I want you to get on the phone with him, all three of you, get on the phone with him again. And, you know, for them to do that, she had to put on full-on garb and,
Yes.
and, you know, all of protective gear. And the boys, they begged him to keep fighting. And that they wanted, that he, you know, not, I remember one of them saying, you know, I want you to fight for me, but I want you to fight for you. And when I got on the phone, I got on last, and I told him, I got this.
Yeah.
Go. He wasn't going to come back the same person, so I gave him permission.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he did.
Oh my God, Stacy. I remember you said that your oldest son, who had been watching the news, I guess, and keeping up with all of it that was happening, he told you that the one of the main concerns was that Anthony was treated with respect, because at that time, for everybody watching on TV and watching the news and seeing what they were having to do with people and not having places to put people, and it was just chaos. You said you had a friend. It was a family friend? It was Anthony's friend. That was
He's a family friend, lives in our community, and he's a funeral director.
So you called him right away.
I didn't even understand, as I mentioned to you, what that meant. When Joseph said that, he had been watching the news, and he had seen that they were inundated with volume of people that had passed away. And when he said, I want Dad to be treated with respect, you need to promise me that, I didn't even understand what that meant. And I said, of course, what are you talking about? And he told me, and the mortification that came over me, that I just made a promise to my kid that I might not be able to keep. I didn't know what to do. So I called our friend, who really was our rock the entire time. We had been, I wouldn't call us very close friends at the time. I would say that we knew each other pretty well, town friends. Anthony was friendly with him. They were a little bit more friendly than I would say I was. I was actively getting close with his wife, who is a very religious and spiritual person, and carried me religiously through the entire, I would say, upheaval of those 3 weeks. Anyway, I called her first and said, is it okay if I call your husband? And she says, please don't tell me you have to call my husband. And I said, I do. And so when I did, he of course had to take a moment to pull himself together and said, you don't worry about anything. I've got this. And that he did, and more.
Yeah.
He did.
You said he was an angel. He's an angel.
Still is. Still is. Very present in my son's lives, and actually has repeatedly said to us, thanks us that we trusted him the way we did, and he felt honored, which takes a very special person to do that. It takes a very special person to do what you're doing, to listen to these stories. You know, we weren't the only family affected by all of this, and on some level, we were so grateful, but on another level, you know, not everybody had what we had, so we feel grateful. It's a very ambivalent feeling.
Yeah. So then you told the police department what happened, And
Well, they
then,
actually knew. They knew all along that they were monitoring his
ah,
condition,
yeah.
and yeah, they knew, and obviously, our place of business, we both work for the same firm, Broadridge Financial, and obviously everybody was notified that night, and nobody thought it was going to end that way again because of Anthony's physical sense. He was healthy, he was athletic, he was young, and didn't fit the bill. So, I really think it was shock to everybody, and let the police department know. And in that scenario, actually, our county executive, um, he was very touched by Anthony and his dedication to the auxiliary police for over 2 decades. He volunteered his time, and he called us directly. He called us on the 20th, the next day.
Mm,
Uh, he had spoken about Anthony on the news. It was all over the news. And after we saw him speak, my older son, Joseph, said, Mom, is there a way we can call him and thank him for the kind words that he said about Dad publicly?
yeah.
And I called the police department and asked them, and they said, yes, we'll get you his address where you can call. And not 15 minutes later, he called us, our county executive in Suffolk County, Steve Ballone. And he called us directly and was so touched by Anthony's contribution. He asked if he could speak with both my sons. And he spent with everything that man had on his plate, he spent about 10 to 15 minutes on the phone with both of them.
Wow.
And then came back with me and said, it's no wonder your husband did what he did, because of the way they so eloquently spoke at such a tragic time.
Yeah.
And I was taken aback, but
Yeah.
I then told him, I said, my husband, when he told me he wanted to join the auxiliary police, my husband always wanted to be a police officer. He was a bit of a procrastinator, and he would push off testing. And so he kept pushing off that police test and kept missing the age cutoff. So when he really decided, oh yes, I would like to do that, he was well past the age of
Mm,
becoming a police officer. So he decided to join the force because he wanted to be a good role model for his boys, for his future family. We only had Joseph at the time, but he wanted to be a role model, and he was for not only them, but so many people.
yeah. Yeah. And so you told me that they had set up this GoFundMe account for you. And within a matter of just, I think it was within weeks, right? That it was
Hours,
hours.
hours.
Oh, not even weeks. They had a substantial amount of money that was set up that they were trying to give you, but
Yeah,
you sat down and you talked to your boys, and everybody immediately was in agreement that this is not money that you are going to take.
correct,
This is money that is going to get passed on,
correct.
because
That
again, that's something that Anthony would want, and that's something that Anthony would do. Yeah.
100%. That's the way we lived.
Yeah.
Um, there's people less fortunate, and it
Right.
didn't belong to us.
So immediately you set up this a memorial fund. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I knew that. It's really easy to give away money when you have it, right? So there are lots of needy people, but had a lot of time, right? So there was, no, we weren't going anywhere. We weren't seeing anybody. And I thought to myself, well, how great would it be if we could continue to help people, maybe fundraise in a way, and start a non-for-profit,
Yeah.
and legally. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who's an attorney, and I said, listen, how do I do this? What do I do?
Hmm.
And she said, I got it. I'll take care of it. And she did. She asked me all the questions, and we established it, and very quickly. And it is an established not-for-profit. It is, had I thought about the name, as lengthy as it is, I probably would have done it a little bit differently, but it's the Anthony DeNoyior Memorial Foundation, and it is an established nonprofit. And we've been continuing to raise funds. People have been donating through various different avenues, through matching gift at different firms, We haven't yet had any kind of formal fundraising event because of COVID, but we've had other little things that have been happening, businesses that have donated, and we've given some scholarships, which we'll do annually to our local schools, baseball scholarships for travel teams, our specific travel team that Anthony was a coach on, and my son played, and we're very close with the owner there. It's Freedom Baseball. He was instrumental in supporting my son Nicholas when my husband passed away, and making him not walk away from baseball.
Yeah.
And he was a good friend. He gave him a job right away and said, you need to get in here, you need to play baseball. And so we'll continue to give back. There's been a few people that have things happen, a house fire or they were out of the job because of COVID, and we've been able to help. There was a family with 2 young kids that both rare forms of cancer. And the mom I don't know the story there and it's really not appropriate for me to say, but the story is that we were able to give a little bit then. And so it's really about, there's no cutoff on financial hardship. Everybody has struggled on some level, whether it be financially or emotionally this past year, and other times too, but everyone has been affected now.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping this is not temporary, that we can continue to help people moving forward the way Anthony did every single day, the way we did as a family.
Right. So the website it's www.
The Anthony DeNoyior, so it's ANTHONYDENOYIOR Memorial Foundation.org.
Okay. And so when you go to the website, you can see all of the information on where to donate. And then there's just all the information on the board members and the information on the scholarships and things that you guys do. So you can go there and check everything out. But
I would also add that if you have somebody in need, you could go there to get in contact with us.
Okay.
To request, funds be used in a certain circumstance. I know that, even through what you're doing, I know there are plenty of people that are struggling. So please feel free to reach out to us at the foundation, and we'll do our best to help on some level.
Oh, that would be wonderful. So I'm going to put a link to that website in the show notes so everybody can find that.
That would be great.
But I do want to shift things a little bit back to you and how you handled those first, few months right after Anthony passed. You told me that you had found an online therapist or a therapist, and then everything was just online at that point.
Right.
So that was your first encounter with a therapist, but what happened with her?
So, look, I guess the the message is that if you don't first succeed, try again.
Yes.
Because it wasn't beneficial, I don't think, for me at all. I think as I stated at the beginning, and I still consider myself someone at the beginning, it's just over a year, but you really don't know what to do. You don't, when you're married or whether you're married a year or 30, which was close to how long we were married, about 28 years. Time doesn't exist when you love somebody from the soul. It's endless. So it doesn't matter if it was 12 months or 400 months. I was lost. And I just knew that if I didn't speak to somebody, that I would, knowing my personality, just keep pushing it down and thinking it's going to go away, that either he's going to come back, or he'll come back, or I'll have to get over it. And the first therapist, we didn't click. There were things that she said that nobody after losing a spouse should hear. When you're looking for hope, I don't think there was a lot of hope there. And again, she herself had lost her husband, and she was projecting a lot of her own feelings that she still had. And that makes my current therapist today, she's not in the same circumstance, but she tells me plenty of her own feelings, but they're not offensive. They're appropriate, and it makes her real. This was a little too real for me to hear at that early stage. And I think I just am grateful that I knew that I had to look for someone else.
What
And
did she say to you? She said something like, "Oh,
it was, I
nobody
had
would ever
to,
replace my husband. There's no way I could." I can't remember what you said. She said, I was just like, wow, that is really not.
well, again, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't know who's going to listen to this, but I had mentioned that my husband's car was, still parked in the same exact spot that it was the last time he drove it. We had not even gone near the car. And I said, is it strange that I was working from home, so I would come down at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and say I have to feed my family, and I'd look out the window and I'd see the car and I'd say, oh, he's home, I have to make dinner. And for that split minute, I kept thinking he was coming through the door. And she said something like, no, that's not crazy at all, I still hear the garage door open and I think he's coming. And she had lost her husband, a very long time ago. And I'm sure that those things, they sort of still happen. I think that they will forever happen. But at that moment, I needed to hear that exactly what I just said, which is those things might happen, but they will not rule your world. And so it's okay for those things to happen. And I'm sure that, they still happen, but and I'm sure they will happen 10 years from now, regardless of where I am or the boys are. He will never be forgotten. He lives in our heart. Those things will happen. But what I needed to hear at that moment, and I hope people hear from me right now, is that what I needed to hear was that's not going to be as prominent as time passes. Those things are still going to happen, but maybe we can start to embrace them, and instead of try to avoid them or have them scare us the way that they were scary. They were, I'm going crazy. Am I really thinking these things? I don't think like that anymore.
Yeah. So your experience with her, like you said a couple of minutes ago, the takeaway is, if you at first don't succeed, try again. Because
yes.
I had a not as your experience, but it wasn't a good fit with the first therapist that I went to, and I kind of gave up on it because I was like, okay, well, this isn't for me, and I didn't try again for a very long time. It was a long time, and I'm pretty sure I needed it a lot, sooner than that. But you did end up finding this awesome grief therapist, and you mentioned a couple of things that she has touched on with you. There was actually two different things that really stuck out that I think that our listeners could benefit from hearing. What your therapist told you, if you could then kind of pass that on to us. The first one was about how sometimes we try and just control our grief.
Yeah, so I had mentioned to you that I'm in a leadership role, so I'm a little bit of a control freak. I like to be in control of everything. I'm extremely goal oriented. I've always done everything with goals, whether it be personal or professional. It's always been around goals. And the first 4 or 5 times I was there, it was all about, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, I've accomplished this, I've done this. And she said, look, you're extremely high functioning. She said, but at what point will you start to trust me? And let's get down to what's really happening here. And it surprised me. I thought I was trusted. I was being so open, but all I was doing was trying to figure out a way to set a goal around grief. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to say, okay, well, how long do I have to come here till I feel better?
Right.
How many times do I have to be here? Let's make a chart. That's me. Like, let's set me some parameters and some goals. And she's so kind. She said, listen, there's no goals here. There's no achievements. There's no sticker or badge that you'll get at the end. This is all a process. And until you start to realize that this is a process and start to be mindful, which is something she says all the time, of what you're feeling, you can't move forward. And so it's not about being better, because I would come in and I'd say, I feel better. And she would say, you're not sick. What do you mean? And I feel sick. I feel like, and I think it's just a shift on how your brain works. Just because you're high functioning and that's what people see, or that's what you want them to see, because most of the time that's what I want people to see, that I'm high functioning. But that doesn't mean that I'm not crying at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. or even when I'm talking to you one-on-one about what really happened. Perception is not my reality, but perception is everybody else's reality.
Yeah.
So she taught me that about goals around grief. And she also,
I love, you're not sick.
You're not sick.
It's not about getting better.
Right.
Yeah.
That is key. You're not sick.
You're not
and
sick. Yeah.
and you're not crazy, and you will overcome. Your strength will be channeled in different ways. The other thing I think you're talking about is the analogy with the waves, I think, that I told you.
Yeah.
And I live by that, because aside from the fact that I am, early 50s, maybe mood swings are part of the age, I'm not sure, but I was never a mood swing type of person. And I literally, what I've experienced over the past year is that I can be sad, happy, laughing, comical. I could feel 10 different emotions within a minute's time. And then I can just stop crying for no reason. A trigger set me off. And one week I when I had gone to see, at that point we were in person, I said, I don't get it. I feel okay, and then I'm not okay. And I can't even put my finger on what happened. And she says, well, it's just like when you're at the beach or you're standing in where the waves break. And you're standing there and the wave comes and it kind of like jolts you. You don't fall down, but you get jolted and you're like, oh, okay, I wasn't ready for that. And then it happens again a few minutes later, and now it jolts you a little harder. Probably doesn't knock you down, but you're like, wow, I should have expected that. It just happened, but it didn't expect it. And now the next one comes and it literally knocks you on your butt.
Mm-hmm.
You learn from that. And now when you get up, you move. You don't stand in the same spot. So it's those waves. So you're making adjustments to deal with the grieving moment that you just had. And you might not even realize it's grief. It might be, I can make decisions all day long. And I said this to you, I can make decisions all day long on a business level, and I shut my computer down and it's time to do personal things, and I stand in front of the washing machine and I look at it and I say, what am I supposed to do? It's the craziest thing to me. And then I have a meltdown that I've got all this stuff on my plate, and I was fine 10 minutes before. So,
yes.
So it's every time I get like that, I think, okay, shift and move. Shift and move.
Yep.
Shift and move. The laundry soap's out to get you, but shift and move. You have to do something.
I love it. It's so true. So you talked about triggers, and speaking of triggers, we talked about this the other day, how, in any other circumstance aside from COVID, people just say the stupidest, most ignorant things, but you and your boys are faced with the most ignorant comments. And I was asking you, like, how are you guys handling that when somebody says to you, oh, COVID is just a conspiracy, it's not even real? How are you guys handling that?
I didn't respond this way to you the other day. I told you it was difficult, but truly the response is silence. And silence sometimes is louder than words. And that, hopefully a friend of mine listens to this. I had texted her and I said, I am beside myself. I want to do X and say X and do this. And she said, that's not your personality. Remember, silence will always speak louder words. And she's right. So typically we're silent. And in that silence, we have lost friends. We have lost, I would say, family members. We have lost family members from not to death, but because they don't do the right thing, or they say the wrong thing. And when I say do the right thing, that's from everybody's different perspective. But for us, not calling or not being present once in a while, just because we don't want to put our dirty laundry out, doesn't mean it's any less painless. And to say to or maybe end a friendship because we don't want to surround ourselves that maybe aren't protecting themselves with a mask.
Right.
And so rather us say, I don't want to be with you because you're not being safe. I can't say to them that my sons have asked me not to leave the house for the past 6 months before I was vaccinated because I was all they had left, and that I had to be safe. So I did not. And some families couldn't understand why I was seeing them before. I had antibodies. I was sick for a while, so I had antibodies. But once I started to see them decline, I could no longer see people because I couldn't put myself at risk. They begged me. It was the one thing I could do for them. So I wasn't about to do that. So I've lost friends. They've lost friends. They've gained some friends in places they didn't think they'd gain friends, and they've lost friends. And it's an eye-opening experience. It really is.
I know. And you said, with your youngest son, who is in his senior year, and he's hearing comments like, oh, I can only bring 2 people to my graduation. And, oh, well, we're not even going to have prom this year. And look at the year that he has had. It's kind of he is gaining all of this new perspective of what's important at a young age of 16 or 17. He's been through a lot. So I can see that his friendships are going to change.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody does it on purpose, right? So, and neither does he. I don't think he doesn't come home and say, can you believe this one said this? What he said was, like, I don't even have 2 parents to bring. And it's not that somebody said, oh, I can't to him. It's just hearing people say, oh, we're not having this and we're not having that. And he's like, well, I don't even have the option.
Right.
And so, and those are things, and the reason I mentioned it to you the other day is, a parent, you feel so helpless. I can't even, he's an adult now. He's turning 18. He's going to be off to college, the other one too. You want to protect them, but these are nobody could protect me either from this loss. Things are going to happen, and we have to shift and move. We have to keep doing that, and they're learning that, and it's unfortunate, but it's going to shape them. So they had the foundation. So they're both great men at this point. They are great men, and they have the foundation laid for them in front of them, and they will always have that. And what they do with that moving forward, the people they choose to be with, the people they surround themselves with, the pettiness of things that mean nothing to us anymore. They're learning that at an early age. So maybe that's the why. Maybe that's, my husband always said, there's a lesson.
That's the lesson.
Maybe
Yes.
that's the
Oh my
lesson.
gosh.
Maybe that's the lesson. And I always find, like, maybe it's this and maybe it's that, but maybe it is that.
Yes.
Maybe it is knowing at an early age that you really have to not take anything for granted.
Yeah.
And we didn't within our core family. Within the 4 of us, there was no doubt. We told each other we loved each other every day. There was no secrets. It was great. We didn't walk away from this thinking, I didn't get to say this or I didn't get to say that. We didn't have any of that. We mourn what we are not going to have.
Right.
And and the fact that we don't have the comedy in the house and the music in the house and the laughter in the house and the love in the house. We try to make up with it within the three of us, but being in such a world in the past year, not being able to surround ourselves with many people and having to make difficult choices on not surrounding ourselves with certain people, it's taught us a lot about perspective.
Yes. And when you and I were talking the other day, this was just a strange, weird thing
Yeah.
that we were talking about this and the things that were going on with your son and the comments and whatever, those things. And I said those words. What did I say? I said,
You said,
that's the
well,
lesson.
that's the lesson. And
I
I
said,
went,
that's the lesson here. And you said, what did you just say?
ah,
Oh my gosh. And the words just came out of my mouth just because what we were talking about, but that was Anthony's phrase, like, right? That's what
all
he
the
would
time.
say.
All the time.
You said
In
that's what,
times of turmoil, any times of, and look, we're human. You get upset with somebody. I'd say to something, I'm like, I can't believe this. And he would say, there's a lesson here somewhere. And look, he would get frustrated too, but then he would even back himself up and say, there's got to be a lesson here somewhere. He said it all the time. And the other thing I told you, and I think it was when I told you about my older son, Joseph, he had been, wanting to be a dentist his entire life. He just graduated from the University of Buffalo in May, right after his dad passed away. He graduated with a music degree, but with a pre-dental focus. And he's changed his entire trajectory. He came about 6 weeks ago, said, I can't do this anymore. This isn't what I'm meant to do. And I said, well, what are you meant to do? Because you need to get a job. So, so he said, well, I think I want to be a mental health counselor. And I just started to cry. And he said, we would not be standing here today without the help we all received the past year. And he's so right. He's so right. So he is now going to be starting in the fall. He was accepted into a program at LIU. I couldn't be prouder of him. It was a very difficult decision to make after knowing what you've wanted for so long. And there's a lesson here.
There's a lesson here. Oh my God. I know, that is just incredible. It's incredible. And the things that, like, right, the trajectory that his life is going down now. It's like this ripple effect of what is happening now with you guys. And you had also told me that in October you had gone to see a nutritionist because you were trying to focus and figure out again, like, who am I? What do I stand for? And I need to be here for my boys. And so you saw this nutritionist and you decided to change that path for yourself, right?
Yes, it was more about health. It's time to get healthy for them. So I started seeing a nutritionist and have changed my entire focus, my diet, my way of life. I started exercising in January. And the nutritionist that I see, she's so wonderful because she's almost like a second therapist. So, most of the time people use food as a crutch in this environment, and I'm no different. So, there had to be other outlets in which you can focus your energy. From last April, not since October, just about 30 pounds, but overall about 35, 40 pounds since my husband passed. I'm down, but it's not necessarily the weight. It's the potential of coming off a medication I was on.
Yeah.
That it's about being able to get on a bike and get off a bike and actually ride a bike. Things I wasn't really focused on from a health perspective, and just taking that focus and instead of making it all negative, trying to focus on a positive. It's not about the exterior. It's something I said we had my husband's memorial on April 19th. We were finally able to have the mass that we wanted to have. My husband never saw beauty from the inside out. I mean, from the outside in. He always saw it from the inside out. So for me, it's, you get the benefits of feeling better because you look better, but it's more about getting the benefits because you feel better.
Yeah.
And then there's more clarity. I told you, I don't remember what happened the first 6 months. I remember bits and pieces, and then more comes back to me when I talk about it. I think that has to do with how I was giving myself nutrition or not giving myself nutrition. There was no clarity at all. None. I thought I had clarity, but I'm seeing things a little bit clearer. It doesn't, every day is not a great day. Every day is not perfect. There are always moments of sadness, again, those mixed emotions, but knowing that it's the one thing I can control. I can control what I put in my mouth.
Yes.
I can control if I exercise. I can control that. I can't control anything else that's happening to us, but I can control that. And I'm going to control what I can control. Going back to what I said earlier, I'm a bit of a control freak.
Right.
So it's I can control something. It makes me feel like I have a purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're taking these steps. You're doing things. You're incorporating, like you told me the other day, you're incorporating these new things into your life, these positive things for yourself. So you can just move forward. It's,
And it's, you said the other day to me, you're so strong. And I have to say that I hear that so many times. I don't know. I don't know if I don't necessarily believe that, but yet I want, if I can help people by showing them that, unfortunate circumstances happen, and, people that knew my husband and I knew how in love we were. 30 years later, it got stronger. It didn't get weaker. We had what most people never find. We had that. I feel fortunate. If you just make little changes, shift and move, you do those little things it will never be the same. But if I can help people come out of that cloud a little bit quicker, maybe, or realize that you can get up every day and you should get up every day, because maybe there's a lesson there for why you're here. Maybe I'm here to help other people. I don't know. I haven't figured that out, but maybe that's the lesson. It's intriguing. It's intriguing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. You find your why. That's kind of what I say too.
Oh, it's awesome. Yes. I'm hoping to find my why.
Find your why. And you are. You really are. So tell us, okay, so you had just one last thing, because I know we're kind of pressed for time a little bit, but your birthday is April 20th.
Yes.
Your birthday is the day after Anthony passed. So last year was just not happening.
No.
Tell us what happened this year and what you decided to do. Was it your sister that you did?
Yes.
How you spent that day? What did you do on that day?
Well, so I just want to say one thing. Last year on my birthday, again, COVID, horrible. My husband passed away the night before. I have very close friends that stood on my lawn on my birthday and created a heart of electric candles. And I remember my son saying, "Mom, I know you don't want to celebrate your birthday, but I think you need to look out the window."
Oh my God.
Yeah. And these unbelievable friends were standing there, a tribute to Anthony and to me, with little gifts, important gifts, but were there for me in spirit and in heart. And so those same friends that are still in my world and so important to me wanted to spend my birthday with me this year and wanted to do all these wonderful things. But I went for decided to go for a massage and a facial with my sister. And first time I ever had a male massage therapist, because my sister wasn't comfortable with one, nor was I, but we had no choice. It was either that or don't go forward. And this massage therapist at the very end of the massage, he was fantastic. And there was pressure points on the back of your neck, and I felt myself tensing up, knowing it was coming to an end almost. And not knowing my situation, not knowing my world and why I was there, because it was a gift to try and be kind to my body after I've beaten it up for my body and mind, honestly. I've beaten myself up for 365 days. That's how I feel. I feel beaten.
Yeah.
He had pressure points on the back of my neck, and he could feel the tension, and he just whispered really clearly, he says, "You need to let it go." And I could feel the tears start to come down, and he said, "Did I offend you?" And I said, "No, you just have no idea what that meant." And when I left there, I was in a better emotional place, I think, in the moment. And I decided to spend the day by myself, not because I wanted to feel sorry for myself, and not because I, whatever, because I was afraid of COVID. I was fully vaccinated, by the way, by that point. So I really had a little bit more freedom to maybe go out and do something to celebrate. But just as I said, I felt it important to give myself the gift of being kind to my body and to my mind, and not push myself the way I had to get out of bed, to eat, to plan, to take care of people, to do all the things we who have lost somebody close to us push ourselves every day. Those little brush your teeth, brush your hair, all those things are monumental events that we take for granted before we're in this situation.
Right.
And I decided not to do any of those things, not to shower, not to do my hair, not to do any of those things, and just be kind to myself. And it was a great day.
Yeah.
It's a great day.
It was a day for you that you just needed to just be.
Exactly.
Not
Just
do
me.
anything, just be.
Although I will say my sons and their girlfriends made it a fantastic night.
Oh.
So it wasn't completely no birthday celebration, but
You got to do both.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, you try to put yourself in situations, I think, that create a new experience that maybe you wouldn't do when your spouse was here, when Anthony was here. You try and change the tradition a little bit so that it's not as painful. Don't expect what happened to be the same. It's never going to be the same. So if you do the same things we've always done before, we are going to expect the same result, and we're not going to get it. So we have to make changes and adjustments to maybe create new memories, because the old ones will never, ever be what they were. So let's try and create new ones, not to forget, but to embrace what we had and potentially create new memories.
Exactly. See, and this is why I think it's so amazing that you are saying the words that you are saying, and it's been a year. Because after a year for me was I was a total wreck. But I think everything that you just said is beautiful. Everything that you just said, people need to hear it, so
may I ask you if that's strange, right? So am I right? So you've now, it's how many years? 9, I think you told me, 9 years later, and you have a wonderful life, and that doesn't mean you forget, right? So, I mean, you're exactly what I should have heard a month in or 3 months in from that therapist, that it's not an easy journey, right? It's not going to be easy, and time doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's 12 months or 9 years. It's how quickly does somebody smack you on the back of the head and say, you're going to need to deal with this sooner or later.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to do it. That doesn't mean we're not gonna have a positive outcome in the end, right?
Yeah.
There is no end. There is no end. I'm trying to learn that.
Oh man, Stacy, thank you so much. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Really, I mean,
Thanks for having me.
For sharing everything, and there was a lot of detail that's really hard to talk about, I know, but I just want to say that I think that the life that you are living now, and that you're going to live, and that the life that your boys are going to live, would make Anthony proud. It is. It is already. You're a good, kind, generous, giving family. And that's a continuation of Anthony's legacy. And it's the way that he wanted to live. So you
Well,
guys
thank you for that.
you
Thank you.
guys
And he would
are,
appreciate that.
you guys are doing that. So tell us again, please, where we can find Anthony's fund.
Yes. So please go to our website at www.theAnthonyDeNoyior, DeNoyior, memorialfoundation.org to either donate or to request funds be distributed to someone in need. We'll reach out to you as quickly as possible to see how we might be able to help, or if you have fundraising ideas or want to get involved and do a fundraiser. We're all in this together, and we can help each other. So please visit us.
All right, Stacy, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jennifer.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Bye.